Is social media going to make me vicariously habituate, i.e., through looking at other people's lives and the experiences they're having, it's moving my bar up, like my own perception of expectations in my life up in an unpleasant way, so that when I go to that same place that Jenny went to on Instagram, it's less enjoyable for me because I've already kind of experienced it through the lens of Jenny's Instagram stories.
Right. So this has a lot to do with what do we expect from life, and how do those expectations impact us? Um, so I think obviously social media is causing us to have unrealistic expectations. We always, I don't know, for most of us, we feel kind of disappointed with ourselves. We go online is because, of course, a lot of people go online and they post the good things, right? Oh, I'm on vacation. I got this award. And then you go online and you're like, oh, all the people, all of these good things are happening constantly. And so you feel disappointed about your own life. You have unrealistic expectations. And it shifts what we call adaptation levels. So basically, we adapt to our daily life, and then things that are better than our daily life, we feel good, and things that are worse, we feel worse. But sometimes our adaptation level can shift, not based on our reality, but what we expect maybe will happen, and also what we see other people are doing. So let's talk about expecting what will happen. So there's a study showing that when prisoners are about to be released, they are still in prison, but in their mind, they're already like thinking about the release, which is great. And so now their expectations are kind of higher, and that makes them feel worse, right? So they're actually very close to release, but in fact, they're feeling really bad because their daily life is much worse from what they expect their daily life to be.
That's kind of like social media, isn't it? You're sat in your house looking out at people partying in some hot, sunny country, having the time of their lives. You feel like you're in prison. Your expectations are being raised because you're watching them have the time of their lives. So suddenly your house feels like, a prison.
Yeah, so your expectations can be based on what you just expect for yourself, and also what other people do. Now, I'm not saying that high expectations are bad, right? Because there's two things happening at the same time. One thing is when the outcomes, so this is related to dopamine neurons. So basically, dopamine neurons in your brain are firing all the time, right? And then when outcomes are better than expected, they fire even more, burst more, right? So you expect to get this amount of salary, you get a higher salary, dopamine goes up. You expect the steak to taste quite good, it tastes even better, they fire more. And when things are worse than expected, they start quieting down, right? So they're quieting down when things are worse than expected. And that is highly correlated with your mood. When there's big bursts of dopamine, you feel good. When the dopamine is quiet, you're feeling bad. But that quiet is important, because that quiet says things are not as good as I expected them to be. And it signals to your brain, I need to learn something. I need to change this, right? There's two things you can change. You can change your expectations, you can lower them, or you can change the reality, right? And so this negative mood that is associated with outcomes not being as good as you expected them can actually lead to progress. So it's a bit of a delicate kind of balance, right? And so often, I mean, there's this really counterintuitive finding, which is when people don't have certain things in their life. For example, in countries where the healthcare system is quite bad, the healthcare system doesn't affect people's daily happiness as much as in countries where the healthcare system is good. So when the healthcare system is good, you expect it to be good. So then any variation can impact your kind of satisfaction. But if you're living in a country where like, well, I know the healthcare system is bad, it's not going to even affect how I'm feeling, right? You have no expectations, and you're kind of, that's not going to impact your happiness.
What do you want people to come away from this conversation with? What is the key takeaway?
A lot of time people may not feel so much joy in their life, and then they look around them and they conclude that maybe I'm not feeling so much joy because my relationship isn't that good, or, my job isn't that good. And, maybe it is, but maybe they are good, but they've just been the same for a while. So we have to be really careful right? And one way, as we mentioned, what you could do is just like spice it up a little bit, shake it up a little bit, right? And see what happens. And vice versa. A lot of times they are things that are negatively affecting your life and you don't know it because they're always there. Social media is one example that you might, a lot of people may suspect that social media, Instagram, Twitter is causing them a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of stress, but they don't really know for sure. You can't measure it until you take a break, right? It's a bit like the AC noise looming in the background. You don't notice it, but when you stop, when you turn it off, you're suddenly, oh, that's so much better. I didn't even realize that this thing is causing me anxiety. So I think, experiment. I think that, the last chapter in the book, we call it experiments in living. Experiment in living, because it's really hard to know what are the things that are really good in your life and what are the things that are not so good in your life until you make some changes. Take a break from social media for a few weeks. Do something different for you, and then you will see.
You write about people taking a break from social media, don't you?
Yes, yes. There's a great experiment that was conducted by the economist Hunt Alcott, where he took 1,000 people, he gave them $100 to get off Facebook for a month, and he took another 1,000 individuals and he gave them $100 to just continue what they're doing. At the end of the month, he came and he measured their well-being. On every single measure that he had, those people who quit for a month were happier. They were less anxious, less depressed, less sad. So in every measure, they were in a better state, right? And they were surprised. They had no idea that this was going to have such a huge effect on them. But here's the even bigger surprise. They said that they were happier, right? They fully admitted it. But most of them, straight away at the end of the month, went back to Facebook, right? Which is really interesting because you acknowledge that this thing is causing you, a negative effect on your health. So when do you go back? I think there's two reasons. One is you gain information and knowledge. That knowledge may, it may not make you feel good, but we value knowledge and information. And that's perhaps one reason why the people went back. It could also be something like addiction. I mean, a lot of things in life that you're addicted to, you kind of know they're not good for you. You know they're not causing you happiness, but there's need, right? There's something pushing you.
There was this crazy stat I read in your book about the impact that leaving social media had on people equated to getting a $30,000 pay rise at work. Something like that?
So it was a study that was conducted by an Italian scientist. And what he did, he noticed that when Facebook first started in 2004, it just started at Harvard, right? And then a while later, they went on to, a lot of Ivy League universities one by one, very slowly. And then 2008, they opened up to the world. And what he found is that in every university that Facebook was introduced, mental health went down. What was the reason he could do the study is that the university had measures of people's well-being. Because they actually measure it quite often, and he can see in every university, mental health went down. Every university, and then in the population, Facebook was introduced in 2008. In the next 10 years, the depression episodes were increased by 80%. Now, you don't know causation. None of this tells you causation. It is only correlational, right?
Interesting.
But, he's claiming that using statistical methods, he estimates that potentially a quarter of this decline in mental health can be due to social media. Again, you can't really, it's not and this is why the other experiment is a little bit better, because the other experiment, Hunt Alcott, manipulated whether people were online or not. So he could actually do a control experiment and measure it, right? So he could show causation. This other study that suggests 25% of mental health decline was caused due to social media, that's a correlational result. But, there could be some truth in it.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.